We're live.
Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing awesome. Once again, it's Tech Fridays and I'm Christine Danchuk and I'm here with Frank Correa and we are here to answer any tech questions that you may have, and there's no such thing as a stupid question, you guys. We are here to help in any way we can. And so type in your questions, and while we are waiting for those to come in, there was actually a question from last week here that I'm going to address. Let's see here. I want to upgrade my front suspension, brakes, and convert to rack opinion steering. I am looking for a rack-mounted electric assist unit that will work on my 57 Chevy. Is there a late model GM unit that has the correct throw and mounting arrangement that will adapt?
Well, usually on anything that modern, usually a company needs to manufacture it to fit these classic cars. You got to realize that almost any regular rack and pinion was put on a front steer car, and these cars are rear steer cars. And so even with the standard rack and pinion, you do have challenges with the steering. As of right now, the only electric unit that I know of is still the one that mounts to the column, which even to this day, I still have not seen one on a car, and I've had nobody ask me to put one on a car. So everything that I've got experience with is late model GM style boxes that will mount directly to the column. You know, today's boxes have modern technology in them, so they're not an old school box from the 80s. They are more newer technology, and they are still boxes that are being used in some race cars to this day. So, but as of right now, I don't know of a rack type mounted unit that would be electric. So, you know, that's usually a question for some of the companies like Borgeson, or Flaming River, somebody who specializes in steering type stuff, if they're going to be able to take something so modern and convert it to make it work in one of these classic cars.
Okay, great, thanks Frank. Okay Robert, I hope that answered your question. Okay, and so while we're waiting for some questions to come in, Frank is going to go over the Chevy rear leaf springs, sorry.
Yeah, so we have here on the table a relocation kit for relocating your leaf springs inside the frame rails. Back probably in the 80s, people were taking their leaf springs and putting them on the opposite side of the frame rail. So taking it from the outside of the frame rail, putting it all the way to the inside of the frame rail. That caused a couple problems. I mean, it was cheap because you could cut your leaf spring perch off and weld it onto the other side of the frame, get a set of leaf spring pads and weld them in a new location on the axle. But what that ended up doing is bringing the leaf springs so close to each other that it would make the car a little bit less stable, especially if you didn't put a sway bar. And then putting a sway bar probably would have been difficult due to the same thing, having the leaves too close. And it definitely made you have to relocate the gas tank and get rid of your spare tire well. So with this pocket kit, being able to be put inside the frame rail, you'll see up here in the instructions that they have you cut out a section of the frame here and insert the pocket up inside the frame rail, and then all of these edges here are welded up to the edge of the frame rail. That's probably one of the more difficult parts, but they do have here also a notch here. They want you to cut the frame out and put a kind of a drop type bridge in there, and that's for clearance of the leaf spring eye. Here we got another picture here. And then right directly above it is going to be the leaf spring perch bracket welded on top of the frame rail. Now the kit comes complete You get the two actual pockets. You're going to get the two hanger brackets for the lease to hang from up above the frame, the two C notches, and then you got the complete bushing kit. Comes with polyurethane bushings so they last forever, and then you got a set of new leaf spring pads to go on the axle that need to be welded on, and these are the hangers to hang the leaf springs from. The leaf springs are sold separately from this kit. By using measurements, it shouldn't be that hard to set up, and nothing is to where you have to mock it up. It should be all done by measuring tape. Now doing this keeps the leaf springs keeps your leaf springs away from your wheels without having to go all the way to the inside of the frame rail. This kit would keep you from having to get rid of the spare tire well, and it keeps you from having to relocate the gas tank. And at the same time, and it doesn't cause the car to be lowered or anything. Your leaf spring, actually, the eyes of the leaf spring ends up in the same exact area as where the stock one was, just further over away from your wheel. Now, this will allow a wider wheel, but if you don't mini tub it, it somewhat defeats the purpose. So in some ways you still have to mini tub the car in order to get that wider wheel. This would only get you, it would gain you, with the inner fender still in there, it's probably only going to gain you a good inch, inch and a half at the most. But if you actually move the inner tub over to the frame rail, this will gain you a few inches, probably a good 2.5 inches or more. So you can go from an 8-inch wide wheel to a 10-inch wide wheel easily.
Okay, we have a question coming in from Les. He says, spot on topic. He said leaf springs or leaves are overlooked with all the coil overstuff today. Can you comment on ride quality on a good set of balanced to load leaf springs?
Yeah, leaf springs, yeah, if you have original leaf springs, they could be pretty tired. Most of the time they've lost some of their spring and the car is sitting a couple inches lower than stock. These here that we carry are made in Canada. They're made of brand new material. These aren't, cheap Chinese imports. And we do order everything in a 5-leaf.
And what are these made out of?
So these are made out of a special heat-treated spring steel, which is probably quite a process to make these. They all got the plastic inserts between the leaves so they don't squeak. They come with the front bushings pre-pressed in. We do have two different sets here. We have a stock set of springs that's closest to me, and then we have a 2-inch lowered leaf spring. So being that these are coming from the same manufacturer, these are based off of 2 inches from their stock spring. So if your car is sitting, people always say, well, is it going to be 2 inches from where my car sits now? Well, if your car's already sitting an inch or two lower because of old tired springs, no, the 2-inch spring is not going to go 2 inches lower than what you got in your car. It goes 2 inches lower from a brand new set of stock springs. So we do have a set of 3-inch, which from previous experience sometimes lowers the car more than 3 inches. So I sometimes recommend to start with the 2-inch, and if you need to go another inch or so, to maybe do it with a lowering block to get more accuracy out of it. But these springs, definitely on a stock spring is going to bring the car up to stock height with no problems.
Very good, thanks, Frank. All right, guys, we're waiting for some questions to come in. You guys are so quiet today. There's not very many questions coming in. And we're here every other week, you guys. We're not here every week, so maybe you're a little confused with that. So it's every other week, okay?
Now, also, with these leaf springs, we could probably get, it's kind of hard to tell between, you know, a 5-leaf leaf spring was, by the way, an option for passenger cars. Your everyday passenger car came off the assembly line with 4 leaves, and the 5-leaf was an option or a special order. And I guess it would have been for somebody who planned on carrying luggage in their trunk all the time, or passengers all the time.
So it's just extra support? Is that why they had the 5th?
Yeah, it's extra support, and it's mostly kind of one extra leaf, and they still have like an overload leaf on it too. So if you actually put extreme weight on it, or a little trailer, I guess back in the day, you know, that would support the spring. Now on station wagons, they actually came with a slightly different, it was a 5-leaf with a slightly different spring rate. And that was because the car was a little heavier in the back, you know, between having a trunk and having an actual longer roof. It actually was a little heavier. So, you know, station wagons came with a 5-leaf particular spring, and they actually had a 6-leaf option that would have probably been even heavier, like the passenger car. But these are kind of an in-between spring. We sell them for both passenger cars and wagons.
So you only need 4 of those then?
No, these ones here is a pair.
Oh, it's a pair.
So we got a pair of these for the rear.
Okay.
If it were a pickup truck, there is a set in the front too. But for the passenger cars, just one pair in the rear. And we don't have any front suspension stuff out this time, because we have a couple different choices of front coil springs to go along with the leaf springs. If you guys had any questions about this, you know, if it's something you were interested in doing, and you still have a question about the installation, I should be able to answer any of those questions. It's going to be a little bit of a time-consuming job, but if you're, you know, have a qualified welder, if you're a qualified welder with a cutoff wheel and a welder, it shouldn't be that hard for you to do. Now with your body on the chassis, it's going to get pretty tight up here in the top area to get that welded in.
Why is that?
Because the body sits really low to the frame there. So you got to be pretty creative when getting your welder up there. You're probably going to have to definitely do a wire feed MIG welder at least to get up there in that tight area. But the rest of it should be a piece of cake. So do we have any questions coming in?
No, we don't have any questions. You guys are so quiet today. Give us your questions. We're only here for a half hour, and you have Frank all to yourself, so you can ask him whatever you would like. And so let's get those questions coming in.
I guess nothing yet. So anyhow, like I said, if you guys have any questions about this stuff right now or anything else, I said these things are made pretty hefty. These are probably good 3/16 steel, pretty heavy duty.
Oh my goodness, they're so heavy.
And they're actually welded up really nice too. See if I can show you guys. It comes with grade 8 bolts, all the polyurethane bushings and everything. So this is a complete line kit. They tell you, they give you the measurements of how far apart these need to be welded on the axle. And I think another thing would be is, I don't know if they go over it in the instructions, but the degree of these. If you're not planning on lowering the car real low, these actually get put back in the same angle as the originals. Now, if you were going to really lower the car quite a bit, then you may want to change the angle a little bit on the rear axle pinion, because as you lower it, the lower you go, the more you need to set the pinion angle. Usually, you could probably find that information on the internet. Might help you as well. And I know there was something else here besides this, but does get kind of important when you lower a car too low. Now, I know the one car that's probably a little bit more difficult is going to be the station wagons. You do this leaf spring kit, and like I said before, it's more helpful to mini tub the car to get maximum clearance for your wider wheels. Station wagons are not as easy to do. A station wagon owner will know that the inner wheel wells to the inside of the car are quite long. They're not like a passenger car that you see inside the trunk. So putting this kit in and not being able to mini tub it, you're not going to gain a whole lot of room. Getting a 10-inch wheel in there is going to be too close still, even with the right offset of wheel. So you do want to think twice about doing this on a station wagon, but on a passenger car, the people use these all the time, and they mini tub it. And we've got 2 different brands of mini tubs that you can use with these. We probably should have brought
I was
the
going to
2
ask you,
out.
what is a mini tub and how do you use that?
So the inner wheel well that you see inside the trunk is your inner wheel well next to the tires, part of the body. So putting your wider wheel, that inner wheel well actually hangs past the chassis. It's probably going to be hanging past the frame a good 1.5 inches or so. And if you want maximum room for wider tires, you need to bring that inner wheel well dead even with the frame at least. Or like I said, it's defeating the purpose of these. So the wheel well inner tubs, we have a set that will move it over that looks kind of like a stock mini tub. If GM would have made them, it would still look factory looking inside the trunk. And then we have a really, really nice set that kind of gives you more of that semi-pro street look inside the trunk area. And they're made out of even, I think, heavier gauge sheet metal than the stock looking ones. We usually carry both of those in stock.
Okay. Let's see here. We have a question from Craig. Craig asks, can I have I have a 55 Bel Air 2-door sedan with a factory 6-cylinder auto. I am putting in a 355. Is the factory rear-ended strong enough, or should I be looking into upgrading?
It's going to really depend on horsepower of that engine. I personally have driven a 55 wagon every day for about 8 years, 10 years, it was a 350 crate motor with a few things done to it. It didn't have gobs of horsepower, but even just messing around and hammering on it a few times here and there, the stock we're in always held up for me. So it's kind of the horsepower rating and how much you're going to abuse it. The rear ends aren't that bad. They're actually pretty tough. I think they're kind of equivalent to a 10-bolt Chevy rear end from like a Chevelle. So if you want something more heavy duty, Chevy-wise, you're going to have to go to a 12-bolt. And if you want something extremely heavy duty, then of course a lot of people are going to the Ford 9-inch in their cars. But
You said about 300 horsepower.
I think it'll be okay. I bet you my engine was probably close to that. And matter of fact, I'm getting the car redone right now at doing about 360 horse, and I may leave that stock rear end in there for a little while, and then eventually I may change to a 12-bolt. But yeah, it just all depends on I guess the condition of the third member. Make sure the third member's not worn out, and then how much abuse it's going to take from you is going to be the most important part.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks Frank. Okay, so I hope that answered your question, Craig. Okay, Corey has a question. Does shocker angle matter with shock relocation bar?
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're moving these leaf springs to the underneath the frame rail, yes, they do have a cross member that will move the leaf springs because you're going to be moving the leaf springs on the bottom end, making the shock absorber a little bit more straight up and down vertical. So the new cross member will bring the top side of your shock inboard a little bit to try to kind of stick with that same angle. So yeah, I didn't think about that when we pulled this out. We probably should have brought a couple shock cross members out that would change the angle a little bit. So then you're going to be fixing two problems. You'll be fixing your angle of your shock, and then by putting the cross member in, you won't have to worry about the sheet metal inside your trunk that the shocks are mounted to now. You know, that sheet metal getting fatigued or anything and cracking. But yeah, that would be a good idea. I didn't even think about that. I'm glad you did ask that question because that does make a little bit of a difference.
Okay. Thanks, Corey. All right, guys, for those of you that are just tuning in, we are Tech Live. We are here for about another 10 minutes, and Frank is answering your tech questions, so take them on in, all right, guys? Okay, we have a question here. Where are the VIN numbers for a 55 located at on the car?
All the places?
Where are the VIN numbers for 55 located at on the car?
Okay, so if it's a two-door hardtop, Nomad or convertible, it should be mounted on the driver's side below your top door, or I'm sorry, below your door hinge. So it's not right in the middle between the two door hinges, it's a little higher than that, but it's right below the top door hinge. If it's a sedan or a station wagon, then you should be looking for it up on the actual A-pillar, the windshield pillar. So all the way above the door hinge and up on the pillar. And in both locations, it was spot welded to the body. The tag was stainless steel, but it was spot welded right to the sheet metal. So if it's been removed, depending on if the car's had body work done or not, you might still see the two spot welds on the sheet metal where it had been at one time. I would think, you know, trying to get it off too, you almost ruin the VIN tag. Now, a lot of times the VIN number should also be on the frame too. To be honest with you, I don't remember where my 55 was on the frame when I had the body off, but I know we do have a 57 chassis here in the showroom for display. And in 57, in the Los Angeles plant, they actually stamped it 2 times on the top driver's side. They actually had, for some reason, stamped it in front of the main brace under the seat, and they stamped it again behind that main brace under the seat. So if you have the body on the frame, it's still going to be a little tough, but I'd be looking underneath the front seat area where the floor pan actually is up a couple inches off the frame with a good flashlight and a mirror. You might get lucky and see that.
All right, these are great questions, you guys. Keep them coming, okay? All right, we got another question here from, I think it's Aram. I'm so sorry if I did not pronounce your name right, but his question is it better to do a rack and a pinion or do a full power steering on a 55? I'm trying to avoid adding another pulley.
So I think you're probably asking if it's possible to do electric. I know we had here from last week someone asking about the electric units instead of doing a power steering pump driven from the engine. I'm not sure if you don't want to add a pulley because it's going to interfere with your radiator and fan. On V-belt systems, yes, if you go to anything beyond 2 grooves, usually the fan has to be, mechanical fan has to be bumped forward, and when you do that, the radiator has to go out in a 6-cylinder position. There's only one electric unit that I've ever seen, and again, I haven't seen it on a Trifive, but I believe they possibly make them to bolt on. It actually is attached to the bottom of the column, and as far as I know, Flaming River is the only company making it. It's something from a more modern car that's all electrically driven. Anything else, a regular rack and pinion or a steering box is going to have at least a mini power steering pump, and it's going to have to be driven off if it's on a pulley groove. Unless you're doing serpentine, then the newest serpentine kits is one single belt does it all.
Okay, so I hope that answered your question. If not, just comment below. And you guys, there's only a few more minutes left, and we will not be here next week. It's every other week that we do Tech Live. And also too, if there's some kind of presentation you would like Frank to go over, like you see here, some display or parts or things that you're having trouble with on your car, let us know so we can, give you a little example here and he can explain and help you guys out. Okay? So is there anything else you want to go over with these leaf springs?
No, I think we've covered about everything. Since we've had this kit out, I've noticed that they've improved on these shackle brackets. These brackets are actually got a little bend on each side to stiffen them up a little bit. They used to be just flat plates before. So it looks like they're always improving on this kit. I'll bet you they've improved on the polyurethane bushings over time too. But yeah, I've noticed that the kit is actually well made, and even though these kits are there's probably a couple different brands of these kits. This looks like it's one of the top kits that are being made right now. And if you guys have any questions else, for this kit, hurry up and get the questions in, because I think we're almost out of time.
Yeah. Actually, there's a question here. Where in Canada are the springs made, and how much are they worth?
I'm not exact. I'm not the purchase agent on these, so I'm not sure exactly where the manufacturer is in Canada. I do know that we are importing these ourselves. There's no distributor in the U.S. now for these, so we're getting these in batches, pallet batches, directly from Canada. I believe these springs, I'm going to see if we have a catalog around here and see what the price is on these. I'm not sure what the current retail is. We'll try to get you an answer on that, or you can call customer service and they can look it up in a computer system. If you want to look it up on our website, the stock springs is part number 285, and the 2-inch lowered springs is part number 15970.
Okay. AJ, I'm a little confused here on your question. He says on my 56, my gas gauge works sometimes. And then he says I think he's trying to say, how can I get the gauge in the sending unit to work? I'm not sure.
Well, so, yeah, there's different things you could have wrong. If a gauge seems to be working accurately sometimes, and then sometimes not even working at all, you could have a loose connection. Resistance is
test. So he's looking for tests. To test it.
To test it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the sending unit puts out 0 to 30 ohms of resistance. So you need to have an ohm meter, preferably a digital ohm meter. You can just pick up an inexpensive one. I've used cheap ones from Harbor Freight, and they work. You want to check that. Now the gauge is a little different. It's not as easy as checking the sending unit. So what you would maybe have to do is make sure you have a good working sending unit, either in the car or out of the car. Let's say you get out of the car and do a bench test. You'll need to hook a sending unit up to your gauge. You're gonna have to supply the gauge with 12 volts. Make sure everything's grounded. The gauge got to be grounded and the sending unit. And as you actually pull the float up, you should be able to see the needle go across. And if you got that float up halfway, it should be right at the half tank mark. So that's probably the best way to check the gauge. A quick way to check a gauge, of course you said it might even work once in a while, but if it don't work at all, you can always turn the power on and take the resistor wire, and if it's an original gauge and you hit ground with the resistor wire going to your sending unit, the gauge should go all the way to full. Now that just tells you the gauge is not fried, that somebody didn't hook it up backwards at one time and cook it. If it's, that just tells you that it's still operational. But for accuracy, it's kind of more dependent on the sending unit being accurate. And again, original sending units and gauges all work off of 0 to 30 ohms. It's early GM. Some of your later model GM stuff going into Chevrolets and Camaros is going to be 0 to 90, so they're not compatible.
All right, guys, I don't see any more questions coming in, but we are out of time. And thank you, Frank, for going over the Chevy leaf springs. I had no idea what they were. Now I do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm excited. I know what they do now. All right, so we will not be here next week, you guys. We will be here the following week. And if you have any questions, you can always send them in via email so we can go over them next time. All right, so thanks for watching. Thank you for all these great questions, and keep on working on those Trifives. And we'll see you next time, all right?
See you in 2 weeks.